Hey everyone, Marnix here. A lot of us get into game development because we have that dream game idea. We have this concept in our head that only we really understand how amazing it truly is. And we want to see it come to life because there's always something wrong with another game. You could have a Breath of the Wild or you could have any other game and there will always still be something that, you could have done better. Or maybe you couldn't have done better, but you feel like could have been implemented better. And just as these ideas evolve, eventually you'll get your own dream game idea. And this is when a lot of people, after usually realistically like years of contemplating and like writing down their story and stuff like that, will finally get an engine and start writing some code. And I think that's a horrible idea and you should never do that. I think before we get into why it's a bad idea, I want to also talk a bit more about how did this video come to be. We as a game development studio had that problem. We wanted to start with our dream game, an open world RPG game where you had big dialogue trees and things like that. After a month, we're like, this is the dumbest idea we've ever had. Let's just scrap that because we didn't even know really how to use Unity. So we made Forge Industry, which was more about learning how to make the game. We have now released Forge Industry. So what's the next logical step? Well, we've dipped our toes. Let's make our dream game idea. And that was kind of what we were working on for the past few weeks. We had been trying out some things, but we realized we're still not ready. And most likely we'll be still waiting a bit before we actually go deep into our next game and our dream game idea. We're in a very big prototyping phase right now where we're not fully certain where we want to go yet, but we've mostly agreed that what we had as a vision of our dream game a few months ago doesn't really align anymore with what we want to do. And that's why in this video I want to go over why you shouldn't just start with your dream game as your first game, or even your second game in our case, or maybe even a later one. But generally, don't immediately go onto your dream game. It sucks, but there's reasons why you shouldn't do it. And that first reason is your technical skill. We came from a programming background, but not a game development background before we started Forge Industry. And before we worked on Forge Industry for a month, we tried working on this open world RPG, our dream game, but we realized quickly that we just didn't have the technical skills to make this a reality. Of course, there's these tutorials that is learn coding, learn making your game in 24 hours or 1 week to get you all of the necessary coding information to use your engine and things like that. But that's not enough. That's enough to get going, but as you'll be making a game that is uniquely yours and uniquely complex in certain regards, there will be stuff that you can't find a YouTube tutorial for. There are things that you will simply have to find out yourself how to implement. And what's more is you will improve upon how you find out these technical skills, and you'll look back at your old code and generally you'll have to rewrite it because you keep learning new things and your old implementations were very bad. A great example of that is how we implemented our item system in Forge Industry. We just had to keep rewriting it because we kept learning new things or running into new things that we hadn't planned for, that we always had to go back and delete what we wrote before and start over. And this sucks. Nobody likes to refactor their code. So it's sometimes better to just deal with the bad code, but finish another project first where you learn to work with the code and then just start all over in a new project. So now we know if we start our next game, how to do our item implementation correct from the first time, instead of always having to go back now and deleting things, but then we have the cascading effect of everything else in our game is dependent on the items as well. Everything else had to be changed. That's a nightmare. It's much better to have shorter projects and just start anew a few times after you've truly improved already a bit as a game developer, and it will save you a lot of time in the end, and it will also just make you have a better development experience. And it's not even just technical that you probably don't know enough. Even just releasing a game is a beast on its own. Things like your marketing or making all of the models, all of your assets. This takes an enormous amount of time, and if you've never done it before, you'll probably fail. And that's fine, that's normal, that's what happened to us. But we were prepared for that because we knew that this isn't our dream, this isn't our passion. We still like the game, but this is not, our end all and reason of existence. So when Forge Industry released and we had mediocre results at best, we were fine because we've learned so much from it. Whereas if you just spent the past 7 years only working on your dream game, well, you never had that learning experience yet. And usually you want your dream game to be a great success. And you can increase that chance of success just by having gone through the motions of releasing games in advance, failing a few times, just falling flat on your face and just feeling horrible for a few weeks, but you'll learn from these things. And that learning is invaluable in making sure that your next game is going to be a much bigger success. Next up is, well, something we've mentioned so many times, but your scope is going to be too big. Or a better way to say this is you have unrealistic expectations of how huge your game is going to be and how vast and awesome it is going to be. And then you actually try to put it into code and write the lines of code, and you realize that for like this one awesome scene, for example, that you're envisioning in your brain that would be like, whoa, this is so cool. It would take you like 2 months to program just like the basic mechanics needed for that, let alone make all of the art and assets to accompany and fill up your game world. It's really hard to do certain things, even like silly things like making your UI. Like you have this cool UI idea, you're most likely gonna be hating your life for like 2 weeks on end trying to figure out alignments, and what if like I run my game on an ultra wide screen instead of a 16:9 1080p screen. There's so much things that you just think like, oh, I can implement this like easy, no worries, and all I really have to do is like make the story good or something like that. But making a story good, then you also have to think about all of the dialogue options. You need to plan all of those things. The scopes generally are huge, and I'm gonna go out on a limb here, and probably I think our biggest demographic as well is solo developers, which just like, it's a whole topic on its own. We'll probably make a video about that in a bit. But your dream game is never going to be like, oh, I want a simple racing game, for example, where we like race each other and it's a bit like Mario Kart. No, you're gonna have like this awesome, like vast world with like epic monsters and things like that. But since you've never released a game before, you have no clue how hard it's gonna be. We already struggled with that, like when we were like prototyping, we were gonna make one level for like our next game, and then suddenly like, oh, we drew out the maps, and then it came to actually putting it into an engine, and we were just like, how do we do this? This is huge. This is a massive undertaking, and it's so overwhelming you don't really even know where to start. Again, this is something that you need to have failed maybe a few times in advance. Realize that, oh, we have completely overestimated how much we can do, and our scope is just infinitely way too large. This game is gonna take us like 8 years to release, and you don't want that. Why do you don't want that? That brings me to my third point. And that is that, as I referenced in the beginning, a lot of developers already give up on their dream game because it's really slow to make progress when it's your first game. And you don't want to be burnt out, because burning out on your dream game, the one reason you got into game development, is going to kill like you ever wanted to go into game development again for probably the rest of your life. Because you will only have these bad emotions linked to it, of when you thought you could do something but you just ended up failing and disappointing yourself. It takes a lot of discipline and willpower to work on the game for like half a year, let alone like 5 years for some of the scopes that you guys come up with. You're not gonna be able to sustain that, not realistically. You're gonna have 5 years is so much time. It's hard to imagine, especially because if you're younger like me and probably like some of you, 5 years, you have no clue realistically what your life is gonna look like in 5 years. Maybe you've moved to like some country, like met some people, you suddenly have 2 children. In 5 years, a lot of things can change that you today don't really know about. And keeping that motivation throughout the entire development process, when you don't really know how successful is your game gonna be, when you don't really know if you're even going to be able to complete it, is really hard mentally. And it requires you to really be able to know that you're strong enough to go through and see this thing through. And of course, it's much easier to realize if you're able to do this or not if you've already done it before, if you've already had a smaller game that was more limited and you were able to fully release it and you did enjoy like the whole game dev process. Not just because it was your dream, but also just because you like developing games in general, not just developing your dream game. And then the last reason is, well, you have your passion, but is it really practical? Because most likely your first game is going to be very, very limited on funding. Because almost no real publisher really is going to go and want to give you a bunch of money to make your dream game. They've seen plenty of you come along, all just to crash and burn. They need someone who can prove to them that, you know, whatever money we're gonna give to these people, it's still an investment. They don't do it purely from the kindness of their heart. They wanna see a return on that. And even if you do get maybe like an investor to jump in, usually they have horrible terms, taking like a whole bunch of your company's equity and such. You would be in a much stronger position to like negotiate for getting funding and things like that if you already have a track record. It doesn't have to be a great one. Just being able to prove that you've been able to release a game, such as we have, we're suddenly leagues ahead of a lot of the other Belgian game developers, because a lot of the people there are still like selling their idea. Whereas we can sell our idea and back it up with the fact that, hey, even when things were horrible, we had no money, We just all did this on the side. We were able to stick true and to release something. Now imagine what could happen if you would give us money, how good the result would be then. Because also, if you have no money, that's like the main thing, it's just gonna cost you a lot of time. And the more time something is gonna cost you, the higher that the risk is of burning out, as I said before. Now, this doesn't mean that I think you should never make your dream game. I think what could be interesting is taking concepts of your game, such as maybe there's like an exploration concept or there's a combat concept, and just working that single concept, not the entire game, but just like one small part of it, work that out into like a smaller game and make it an actual game that you release. That's what I always say, don't just make prototypes, finish it. It doesn't have to be the most polished and most 10 out of 10 game. If it's a 7 out of 10 or an 8 out of 10, that's perfectly fine. Get that thing released, learn your lessons from it and move on. So I hope that you liked this video. Maybe this was not what you wanted to hear, because you love your own dream game idea. It's your dream. But sometimes you just need someone to maybe tell you a bit more, to be realistic and take some things into consideration. My call to action for you guys is always to just make a game. Doesn't need to be a great game, but just make a game before you do anything else. Learn all of the steps in the process. That's all I had to say for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments your thoughts as well. Have you started working on your dream game like we did at some point, but then realized that, hey, you don't have the actual skills for it yet? I love to interact with you guys. If you're new here, we're a game development studio. We've released our own game. We share lessons about just game development, things we learned along the way, take you along with vlogs and things like that when we go to gaming events. If that's something that interests you, be sure to go ahead down below and maybe leave us a like, as well as maybe subscribe. We upload 2 videos every week and it's a win-win for both of us. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!